Hello, this is the third video in the watercolor or stained glass watercolor landscape project. And today what we're going to do is we are going to work on the actual watercolor paper. If you are joining us from home, you may or may not have watercolor or even watercolor paper. So here is my suggestion. If you do not have any watercolor paper, I would use printer paper and colored pencils. So what you'll do is you'll actually take two pieces of printer paper. Let me see if I can get any higher here, maybe a little bit. All right, you're going to put them side by side. So they're vertical pieces of printer paper. You're going to put them side by side and you're going to actually tape them together so that you have a nice big piece of paper. So this piece of paper will be 11 inches by 17 inches when you're all done. Now, those of us joining us from the classroom, you are going to have a piece of watercolor paper. When we start this step, we have to make sure that you have 4 different sketches completed. So when I look at these, I'm going to choose the one that I think would work the best on a project. It doesn't have to be the one that's most complicated or even the one that is simplest, but the one that you want to do for your project. So for me, I chose coastal landscape. So I always just star it when I want to use it. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I am going to actually draw what I see here on my paper. Now, let's say you messed up on this picture and you don't think it looks very good. Instead of drawing off of the sketch worksheet, you can actually go back to your picture that you looked at originally, try to find it, okay, as best as you can. This way you can look at the different colors and you can draw it a little bit more accurately. So if I thought, I really just don't think that I did a good job on the sky or on the actual water part, I could redraw it. All right, so once I draw it, I'm going to make sure that I do it lightly in pencil. I drew this harder so that you could see it on the document camera. You're going to need a ruler to divide up your project into stained glass sections. So on mine, let's see. I'm going to make sure I'm teaching you the requirements. I want to pull up that sheet here. All right, so here are the Art 1 stained glass watercolor requirements. It says, number 1, create a landscape that is divided into stained glass sections. Number 2, outline each section and design with a crayon. So I'm going to show you how I suggest doing it. It doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it. Certain images or certain pictures may require an adjustment or different steps. So if you're concerned about it or you don't understand it, talk to me and I'll help you. So in general, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to divide up vertically the paper and add about 3 different lines. So I'm going to tilt my ruler maybe a little bit to the side like this, draw a line. Go over here, tilt it maybe the other way. It doesn't need to be like a perfect V at the end or anything like that. This is not an exact science. Draw a line. Okay, go over here, try to divide up the space. Again, they're not like perfect V's. I'm just adding lines. If you think that you need more lines, you can add more lines. Typically then what I do is I usually have a bigger ruler. I will take and I'll add like 2 to 3 lines that go across, usually 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a line that's tilted upward, and then I'll just move the ruler over to finish the line. Okay, and then down here, I'm also going to do the same thing. Now, when you're all done, you have to look and see how your overall project looks. To me, this looks a little bit too big of sections here. So I'm actually going to divide up this a little bit more. Now, each section doesn't have to be equally divided, because if you remember, some of the stained glass had little pieces and then some of the other sections had bigger pieces. So if you want to make, like, let's say in this smaller section, I have my, it's like a mountain area / rock area. If I want to make different stained glass pieces and just make them smaller, I can. But keep in mind, you do have to paint these in. So if you are going to make very, very tiny sections, probably not going to work out all that well. You want to do your best to try to keep them from being too even. These look a little even to me, so that's probably not the best. I'm going to go through and I'm going to make my entire area that has this mountain range. I'm going to make it small sections so that it looks different from everything else. So I've got that kind of smaller section area. I like that, looks decent. Okay. Then the ocean, that's way too big of an area in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add maybe a couple more areas. It doesn't have to be super tiny. Okay, I think that looks good. This area looks a little bit too big to me, so I'm going to go ahead and divide that up a little bit more. And then I guess the sky, if I want to keep some big areas, that's fine. All right, so I'm going to leave this how it is right now. I think it looks okay. All right, next step. I'm going to find a crayon. Now, you can use a black crayon for the outline of your stained glass. You can use whatever color you want. Keep in mind, though, if you are using like yellow or white, it necessarily, the pencil may show through. So if you are going to use a super light color like white or yellow, you need to go through and you need to take your eraser and you need to lighten up all of your lines so that the pencil doesn't show through. Don't lighten them so much that you can't actually see it. Then I'm going to take my crayon, and this is going to take a while. I would work, if you're right-handed, I would work left to right. If you're left-handed, then you're going to work right to left. That way you don't smear. So I'm going to take the crayon, and I'm going to create a barrier. This is the outline of my stained glass, but I'm doing the best I can to create a barrier of wax with the crayon. Why am I doing that? Well, when you go through and you add watercolor is very difficult to stay in each individual section. So by adding the crayon has wax in it, we are creating a barrier. In saying that, if your barrier has a lot of open spaces, you go over it real fast, okay? You know, you're not taking your time, you go over it real fast. Well, the deal is that most likely you're going to have holes. So when you go to actually do your watercolor, it's going to leak. I only have one watercolor paper per person. So make sure by the time you get to this section, you do it carefully and as best as you can. If you mess up, we're going to have to take that mess up and turn it into part of your project because I don't have a second piece of watercolor paper. If you are working at home and you do not have watercolor, I am going to have you use colored pencil to outline your project instead of crayon because you'll be doing your project in colored pencil versus doing this in crayon. But the steps themselves will be the exact same. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to outline all of this. And when I'm done, I'm going to go to the next video, which talks about the watercolor requirements.